Hi, this is Dr. Shelagh Gallagher. I'm the author of Black Death, a problem-based learning unit about the outbreak of plague that devastated medieval Europe. The unit was developed and pilot tested in several North Carolina middle schools as a part of the Javits Grant Project Insights. Black Death is now published by Royal Fireworks Press. In 2000, Black Death won the NAGC Curriculum Division Award for Exemplary Middle School Curriculum. In this presentation, we'll take a walk through Black Death so you can have a sense of how the unit unfolds. Along the way, I'll take time to describe activities and assessments that are included in the unit. I'll also describe different supports that are included in the teacher manual so you can be successful teaching Black Death even if you're new to problem-based learning. Black Death introduces middle school students to Europe in the late 1340s and to an epidemic that killed almost a third of the population and changed the course of history, ultimately opening the door to the Renaissance. During the course of the problem, students learn about living conditions in a medieval village. They learn what people considered cutting-edge medicine of the day. They look at trade routes that were also the transmission path for the plague. They read primary documents that describe preferred treatments. They learn about the public's panicked response, and they're introduced to plague art. Ultimately, students will learn how a disease dismantled a culture. We'll get back to the story in a minute, because the story is always the heart of a PBL unit. Those of you who are familiar with the medical model of problem-based learning know that it transforms the classroom into a content-rich, inquiry-based environment. Three elements work together to make PBL successful: designing curriculum around an ill-structured problem, having students as a group adopt the perspective of a stakeholder, and changing the role of teacher from lecturer to guide or coach. The ill-structured problem creates the scope and sequence of the unit. Of course, the problem is really designed so that students will encounter content objectives we want them to learn. In this respect, the problem is only ill-structured for the students. A problem narrative is included in the teacher manual to give you a sense of how the story progresses. This narrative can serve as a curriculum guide of sort if you're new to PBL or if you're teaching the unit for the first time. If you're already familiar with PBL, use the narrative as a guiding framework you can shape according to your students' questions or their learning needs. As students explore the problem at the center of the unit, they move through 5 phases of problem solving, including problem engagement, inquiry and investigation, problem definition, problem resolution, and problem debriefing. As students follow this flow of the problem, they're drawn further into the story and towards the content objectives that we desire. All stories have a beginning. In a PBL unit, the story begins when students encounter an opening scenario that sets the stage and introduces them to their problem. Black Death has a 2-part opening scenario. In the first part, students find themselves transported to a medieval village in northern Italy. They read descriptions of different aspects of medieval life and are asked to create a drawing or a mural or model of a medieval village. By the end of the activity, students understand that medieval towns were crowded and unsanitary, and that they were governed by a strict social hierarchy. Students also receive a role representing their profession in the town. More importantly, they learn that they sit on the Council of Elders, a governing body for the village. This is their shared stakeholder role. The problem begins in earnest when students learn that they've been called to an emergency meeting of the Council of Elders. At the meeting, a traveling merchant gives a report about the Black Death, a disease that has been ransacking Italian towns to the south. They are urged to take measures to protect their town from the coming plague. I should mention that while you can rely on the written descriptions provided in the unit, students respond particularly well to having a real person in period costume appear to deliver this message. After hearing the merchant's chilling report, students complete the Learning Issues Board, listing the information they know and questions they need to answer in order to understand the situation better. Students then prioritize their questions, selecting the top 4 or 5 they need to answer first, and create a plan of action to find answers for those top priority questions. They are then ready for the next stage of the problem, inquiry and investigation. During inquiry and investigation, students search for the answers to the questions they've listed on the Learning Issues Board. The Black Death resource book will give you and your students a jump start on their search for information. The book contains a wealth of primary resource material that you can copy and organize in folders or leave around the room for students to discover as they research. It's organized into different sections so you can pick and choose the materials as you see fit. There are background readings on the plague, first-hand accounts of life during the plague, and visual material including paintings and statuary. These resources are also included on the unit CD. This particular problem is designed to limit students to information that was available in 1348, so they get a sense of what it was like to try to contend with the plague at a time when medical knowledge was very limited. For that reason, most of the internet sites included in the resource book focus on filling in information about what life was like during medieval times. The nonfiction reading helps teachers meet new Common Core standards for language arts as well as for history. Interdisciplinary connections are also established through literature selections in the resource book, including poetry and even a brief selection from the Canterbury Tales. A selection of trade novels about the plague is also included that students could read alongside the unit. The new Common Core standards also encourage careful note-taking and citation. Black Death includes note pages that help students focus on finding information that is relevant to their learning issues questions as they gather information from the resource book readings or internet articles. Students are also prompted to follow proper MLA citation style. People sometimes think that students should be on their own during problem-based learning because of the emphasis the model places on self-directed learning, but that's not quite right. It's more accurate to say that a goal of PBL is to set the stage for students to learn how to be self-directed learners. As a PBL teacher, your instruction is redirected towards providing students the skills and tools they need to work their way through the problem. Embedded instruction is the term used in PBL for the moments when the problem-solving team needs some assistance from their guide. In this respect, PBL attempts to model the apprentice-mentor relationship, or the relationship between a coach and a player, or a director and an actor. Teachers are relieved from the role of delivering content because the ill-structured problem pushes students towards the information you want them to learn. They end up bringing the information to you. Lessons embedded in Black Death help you add to the student's intellectual toolkit. For instance, in Black Death, students learn to read maps by tracing the 3 trade routes by which the plague spread, and then calculate the speed with which it traveled on each route. In other examples of embedded instruction, students learn how to analyze the problem in different ways. In one activity, students engage in a simulation that demonstrates how quickly the plague spread through a village. They calculate the rate of infection and then discuss what happens to a town when different members of society die. In another exercise, students receive advice from a doctor and a priest. They have to identify what information is relevant and whether any of the relevant information is actually helpful. They also come to understand why a common peasant, uneducated and illiterate, might be confused and uncertain about what to do in the face of conflicting advice. Another frame of reference experts use when solving a problem is conceptual reasoning, seeing abstract or universal relationships at play in a problem. Part of the embedded instruction in Black Death involves teaching students about the nature of risk. They consider two variables that make a situation more or less risky: the likelihood that an event will occur and the significance of its impact. Students also explore the relationship between risk and vulnerability. The key question sets included with each lesson help bring the discussion to a conceptual level. By the end of the unit, students should understand these generalizations associated with risk and vulnerability. Eventually, students understand the problem well enough that they are ready to create a specific definition of their problem. Students are encouraged to think of problem definition as a combination of an issue or issues in need of attention and constraints that limit the kinds of solutions they're willing to consider. For instance, students may decide that a successful solution must keep the town intact. This would be included as a constraint in the student's problem definition because they've decided that they will not consider options that involve dispersing or dismantling the town. Having reached consensus on a clear problem definition, students are ready to consider different solutions. In Black Death, students start their search for solutions by reading the Ordinances of Sanitation in a Time of Mortality, a set of rules established for the town of Pistoia. Students read the regulations, paraphrase them, and then decide whether or not they seem effective. Using these ordinances as a basis, they craft their own set of recommendations. Students present their recommendations to the Council of the People, the governing body that has the authority to change recommendations into law. Once students present their solution, the story of Black Death ends, but there's still one more stage to problem-based learning: problem debriefing. Research in PBL suggests that this stage helps solidify content knowledge, as well as students' awareness of the problem-solving process. The Black Death Teacher Manual contains several ideas for problem debriefing. Students could describe how their model village would be different after the plague. You could discuss the nature of risk, helping students transfer the concept to new situations. Or you could compare the Black Death then to threats of epidemics today. Always, we like for students to reflect on their problem-solving process so they're better prepared the next time they encounter an ill-structured problem. That's one way the unit can go, but you can always shift the story of Black Death through the use of kickers, or twists in the plot. Kickers can be used to add new dimensions to the problem, to emphasize particular content, or to help students focus on the task at hand. All sorts of kickers can be built into Black Death, like having a merchant show up claiming to have a miracle cure, or by creating a weather event that would change the level of risk to the town. Throughout the unit, students complete a variety of assessments, most of which are compiled in the student problem log. Special attention was paid to incorporate exercises that were relevant to the problem, yet still meet new Common Core requirements for research, note-taking, oral presentation, and for analysis and reasoning. Black Death also includes materials to support your journey through the problem. In addition to the problem narrative, there is an alignment chart that shows where different skills and ideas appear in the unit, and sample 2- and 3-week schedules. In the back of the manual, you'll find how-to essays that will help improve your skill as a PBL coach. Also in the back of the unit are a number of charts demonstrating alignment of the unit with national history standards and with standards from the National Council for Social Studies. There are also charts demonstrating the alignment between Black Death and Common Core standards for reading, as well as for writing, speaking, and listening. Black Death was also one of 2 units at the center of a research study demonstrating the efficacy of using PBL to unearth previously unseen academic talent. I hope those of you who are interested will download the article at the URL listed at the bottom of this slide. If you're interested in teaching Black Death, you should order the teacher manual, the student problem log, and the resource book. Another helpful book would be Problem-Based Learning in the Classroom, which is a practical guide on how to teach PBL units. If you're interested in widespread use of this or other PBL units in your school or district, hands-on workshops are available through Royal Fireworks Press. I hope you found this walk through Black Death helpful. To see slideshows describing other PBL units in this series, please visit the Royal Fireworks Press website at www.rfwp.com. And thanks for listening.